Hey guys, tonight we're venturing deep into the lowland jungles of Mesoamerica, where the thick, humid air hangs heavy and every leaf seems to whisper. As you duck beneath a palm-thatched roof and step into a dim, smoky hut, your eyes adjust to the fire glow flickering off packed clay walls. In the center of the room, there it is, your bed, a hammock. Not a cozy one, mind you. It's made of twisted rope, suspended between two wooden posts, sagging slightly like it's already given up hope. No pillow, no blanket, just you and this bouncy spiderweb of optimism. You reach out and prod it with one finger. It swings, you step in, it swings harder. Your whole body shifts with the movement, and suddenly your inner ear is not happy. This isn't sleeping, this is surviving. And yet for the Maya this was luxury. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're listening. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You settle back and sway gently, trying to ignore the warm trickle of sweat along your temple. The hammock groans softly under your weight, as if judging your lack of core strength. You're lying in a traditional Mayan home, probably in the Yucatan. The air smells of maize, burnt wood, and some herbal something you can't quite identify, maybe copal resin. It's sticky, sweet, and smoky, the kind of scent that clings to your skin and your dreams. No bed frame, no mattress, just tightly woven, fibers strung across open air. And this isn't some jungle hack job. The Mayans were among the first hammock engineers, refining the concept over thousands of years. The oldest evidence dates back to around 1000 BC, woven out of tree bark, agave fibers, and a strong sense of we will not sleep on that bug-ridden ground again. The design is simple but brilliant. A tightly woven sling of plant fiber hangs between two vertical posts or trees suspended off the ground to avoid biting insects, slithering snakes, and the occasional flooding. It's breathable, portable, and once you get past the learning curve, surprisingly comfortable. But this wasn't just a practical solution. For the Mayans, a hammock was cultural, sacred even. You weren't just lying down, you were entering a space between worlds. Sleep was a transition, and this little cradle of rope held more meaning than your memory foam mattress ever could. Now try not to think about the fact that some of the earliest hammocks may have doubled as burial shrouds. Oops. Too late. Back in your swinging cocoon, the sun's gone down. Outside, you can hear the crickets start up, then the frogs. In the canopy, something large and winged flutters by, and your survival brain whispers bat, or monkey, possibly both. Your hammock swings again. Maybe it's the breeze. Maybe it's the ghost of an ancient weaver checking your posture. Historians still argue whether the first hammocks were ceremonial or purely practical. Some think they were inspired by spider webs. Others suspect they were meant to mimic the swaying of tree limbs, comforting and natural. There's also a theory that they allowed people to be closer to the sky spirits while sleeping. The truth? Probably some delicious blend of all the above. You shift your weight, trying to find that mythical sweet spot where your hips aren't being pinched and your feet don't feel like they're hanging in space. It takes work. Mayans likely learned from childhood how to nap in these like pros. You look like a confused burrito on a trapeze, but eventually, you get there. Your back flattens, your legs find balance, your arms rest on your chest, and the swaying slows. The night thickens. It turns out there's something deeply primal about suspending your body above the earth. It's vulnerable, but freeing. You're off the ground between the dirt and the stars. You're not in a bed. You're in a liminal state, and it's starting to work. You listen. In the corner of the hut, an old fire pit glows faintly. The coals pulse like a sleepy heartbeat. A ceramic bowl sits nearby, probably once filled with a toll or some fermented maize drink. A jaguar mask hangs on the far wall, watching you with carved obsidian eyes. The hammock creaks as you breathe. Maybe you start to imagine the hands that tied this thing, woven loop by loop with fingers trained from childhood. Some hammocks took weeks to make. They were gifts, dowries, sacred offerings. Some were even buried with their owners. You were never meant to have this hammock, but tonight it's yours. Even now, modern descendants of the Maya still sleep in these swaying beds, though now they might be made with cotton blends and neon dyes. The essential design, though, remains unchanged. And the first time a Spanish conquistador saw one, he reportedly thought it was a kind of fishing net, which, if you think about it, is sort of accurate. Only, instead of catching fish, it catches your entire exhausted body. You yawn. The motion makes your hammock rock again. You let it. You're not entirely sure whether you're supposed to lie diagonally, banana style, or straight like a mummy. Either way, you're slowly becoming one with the rope. The bugs outside have sensed up into a rhythmic chant like nature's white noise machine. Occasionally something rustles in the underbrush, but you're not worried. You're off the ground. You're safe. Probably. And with every soft sway of the hammock, every soft exhale, you start to drift just a little closer to the world the Mayans knew. One where sleep wasn't separate from spirit, where beds were made of plant and patience, and where optimism really was spun into every fiber. You wake kind of, not fully, just enough to realize that your shoulder's gone a little numb, and one leg is dangling in a way that probably defies ergonomic design. But you don't care. There's a strange comfort in the imperfection. This bed was never about perfect comfort. It was about surviving the jungle. Yes, but also about aligning your body to the world around you. You shift again, gently rocking the hammock, and your thoughts drift to a topic the Mayans didn't have a word for, but probably understood better than most: posture. Turns out this floppy sling of fiber, it's good for your back. Or at least it can be if you know how to lie in it properly. You've got to hit that perfect angle where your spine stays straight, hips are level, and your chest can expand as you breathe. No fancy chiropractors. No lumbar memory foam. Just physics, muscle memory, and plant rope. Modern orthopedic studies, yep, people study this, have shown that properly strung hammocks, especially in the Mayan style, encourage a natural curve in the spine. Your body gently molds to the sag in the hammock, relieving pressure on joints and improving circulation. It's like your vertebrae are letting out a sigh of relief after centuries of mattress abuse. Of course, you don't feel that relief right now. You feel like a noodle that's halfway off the plate, But if you grew up with this, if your body was trained to sleep suspended from birth, you'd probably wake up feeling refreshed and centered and weirdly smug. There's even a fringe theory that the Mayan affinity for hammocks helped them develop superior posture and resilience. Ancient glyphs often depict tall, upright figures with squared shoulders and poised necks, not hunched like over-scrolling modern humans. Historians still argue whether these artistic renderings were stylized or realistic, but there's something appealing about imagining a civilization whose sleeping habits literally held them upright through the day, and this wasn't limited to peasants. Evidence suggests Mayan elites, too, slept in hammocks, often with additional layers of decorative cloth or cushioning. The design may have varied slightly, but the core principle remained. Sleeping suspended was seen as healthy, wise and sacred. By contrast, lying flat on stone slabs, like their Olmec predecessors did, was slowly going out of style. Not just because it was uncomfortable, but because it was too close to the earth, dead feeling. In the Mayan view, life moved, it breathed, it swung. The hammock, in a way, was a living thing. Outside, a gust of wind rustles the thatch roof. You hear the patter of something hitting leaves, maybe a light rain, maybe a small monkey throwing fruit again. Who can say? Inside, you're cradled, your spine's adjusting, cracking softly with each sway. You start to realize why so many cultures around the equator adopted this sleeping style. The Philippines, Brazil, the Caribbean, and always with the same materials: strong plant fiber, clever knotting, and a refusal to settle for sleeping in bug soup. You're reminded of that strange little saying from the Yucatan: better a swinging bed than a crawling companion. It loses a little charm in English, but the point holds. Sleeping above ground meant fewer centipedes in your armpits, probably and it wasn't just bugs the Mayans were avoiding. Lying flat on the ground exposed you to moisture, heat, and spirit, some friendly, some not. A raised hammock put you at a liminal height. You weren't entirely on Earth. You weren't entirely gone either. You floated. There's something deeply symbolic about that. Your body begins to relax more fully now. It's adjusting, learning. You shift your weight gently and find that, yes, there it is. That moment of weightlessness where the hammock holds you just right, like a firm breeze or a memory you didn't realize you missed. You start to think about the labor behind this thing. To you, it's a novelty, a conversation piece at a beach resort. To a Mayan family, it was essential. The women often spun the fiber, processed the agave, and wove the loops, while the men helped string them up high on wood supports carved. Into the home, hammocks were household fixtures, tools, heirlooms. They were also incredibly adaptable. Fold it, roll it, take it with you. Sleeping in a new village? Bring your own bed. Need space during the day? Unhook it. Nothing to wash. Nothing to fluff. There's a minimalist genius here. No clutter. No squeaky bed frame. No hoarding under the mattress. Just the essentials. Plant, rope, breath, and trust. You hear a soft thump. Outside, something just landed on the roof. But you're not worried. The hut's solid. The hammock's high. And whatever it is probably has 4 legs and 0 interest in you. You shift again, pulling the edges of the hammock up like a cocoon. Some Mayan hammocks were designed with extra wide sides just for that wrapping around the sleeper to keep out mosquitoes and moonlight alike. A kind of fiber womb isolating you from both the jungle's chaos and your own restless mind. And for Mayans, rest wasn't just rest, it was preparation. Tomorrow you might farm, build, carry water, climb a pyramid, or interpret a dream for the village priest. Sleep wasn't optional. It was sacred. There's a strange optimism in that mindset. Not just sleep so you don't die, but sleep because the gods gave us this moment to restore. Hammocks weren't indulgences. They were tools for survival and a reminder that even in the stickiest, noisiest, buggiest corners of the world, you could still carve out a little peace. You exhale slowly, the hammock sways, your spine whispers thanks, and your thoughts drift to the next mystery waiting just outside, somewhere near the sacred trees and sleeping gods. The air has shifted again. It's darker now. Not nightfall dark, you've already crossed that line, but that extra depth of night where the shadows feel thicker and the sounds get weirder. Somewhere nearby, something lets out a croaking trill that starts high and falls like a sad slide whistle. A frog, you hope, or something frog-adjacent. You're still suspended in your rope cradle, one leg slightly tangled in the side, like a ship's anchor half-dropped. You twitch a little and set the whole thing rocking again. It's both a lullaby and a workout. Out in the trees, the jungle orchestra is in full swing. Cicadas, frogs, owls, and a creature you swear just said your name. You're not entirely sure whether the sounds are layered for intimidation or coordination, but either way, the volume control seems broken. You blink toward the thatch roof and try to distract yourself with a different thought. Why here? Why hammocks here? And then you remember, it's not just about avoiding bugs and heat. It's about the land itself. The Maya built their lives literally on limestone. The Yucatan Peninsula is full of it. A porous, rugged rock that drinks rainwater faster than you can say underground cenote. Add to that the intense humidity, the tendency for ground-level flooding, and the occasional shifting of the earth. Beneath you and suddenly sleeping on the ground seems like an invitation for disaster. That's where the sacred ceiba trees come in. Known to the Maya as Ya-Axi, the ceiba was considered the axis of the world, the link between the heavens, the earth and the underworld. They often grew tall, straight, and wide-rooted, standing apart like green monoliths of myth. And guess what made a great hammock post? You stretch your neck and glance out the side of the hut. If you squint, you think you can make out the silhouette of one thick trunk, umbrella-like canopy, the kind of tree that radiates presence. You could hang an entire family's worth of hammocks from a good ceiba. Historians still argue whether ceiba trees were chosen for hammocks because of spiritual beliefs or because they were simply the most practical option. But again, the Mayans didn't see those two things as separate. The sacred was practical, and the practical often turned out to be sacred. You shift again. The hammock sways. The rope creaks in its familiar rhythm, like an old friend sighing in time with your breath. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a branch cracks. Loudly, then silence. You wait. Nothing. You're fine. Probably a tapir, or a deer, or a ghost. Either way, your hammock is 5 feet off the ground, and still the safest seat in the jungle dot in the stillness. Your mind turns back to the ceiba. Mayans. believed its roots reached deep into Shiboba, the underworld, while its branches brushed against the heavens. To sleep under or near one was to nestle against the spine of the universe. Not a bad bedtime image, really. You're starting to see how all these things, trees, stars, ropes, shadows, tie together in the Mayan worldview. Life wasn't a straight line. It was a circle, a loop, like a woven hammock pattern. Intricate, interlocking, with space between every line to breathe. And speaking of breath, you become suddenly aware of your own again. It's slowing, deepening, matching the sway. Your thoughts wander to the people who once lived in this very environment: farmers, warriors, healers, potters, kids who grew up climbing trees and swinging into dreams each night. Their homes weren't just places to live. They were ecosystems connected to the land, to the stars, and to the stories passed down like oral heirlooms. And always the hammock. Even now, in the modern Yucatan, it's not uncommon to find homes with no beds, no couches, just hammocks strung wall to wall. Kids learn to nap in them like it's instinct. Grandparents still prefer them over those hot, stiff beds. There's a pride to it, a quiet understanding that this thing, this rope cradle, has lasted longer than most empires. You let one arm hang slightly off the side. The air is cooler now. Not cold, nothing is cold here, but there's a kind of moisture that makes the night feel thicker. You imagine the damp creeping up from the jungle floor, roots drinking, earth exhaling. The idea of sleeping on that damp, insect-welcoming ground? No thanks. The Mayans knew better. Elevation wasn't a luxury. It was sanity. There's even a weird little belief, still held by some rural communities, that if you sleep on the ground too long, the earth will pull at you, drain your energy, sap your dreams. Not enough to kill you, just enough to make you forget who you are. Which, if you've ever tried to nap at a bus stop, kind of checks out. So, in a way, your hammock is your boundary line. You're here, yes, but also not fully surrendered to the land. You're floating just above it, like a leaf, like a breath, like an idea still forming. You exhale again. The rhythm of the jungle feels less overwhelming now. The sounds blend into one another: bugs, birds, distant dripping water like background music to your rope lullaby. You sway, and in that subtle motion, somewhere between earth and air, you start to understand why hammocks lasted, why they spread, why even now in your concrete box of a modern apartment, the image of a hammock still whispers rest to you. It's more than a bed. It's an escape hatch. And as your eyes grow heavier and your limbs soften into the shape of the night, you realize something else. This is the only bed you've ever had that feels like it could float you into another world entirely. You're not sure when you drifted, but now you're back, still cradled, still swaying. The air is thicker somehow. The night deeper. The bugs outside seem to have hit a synchronized rhythm that could probably be copyrighted. Your shoulders ache slightly from the hammock's embrace, but it's the good kind of ache, like your body's remembering how to be held by something other than gravity and capitalism. And in the glow of the fire's dying embers, it hits you, this thing you're lying in. It wasn't just a bed. It was royal furniture. That's right. For the ancient Mayans, the hammock wasn't just for commoners trying to avoid floor snakes. It was for kings, nobles, and even priests navigating the cosmos in sleep. Turns out, Mayan elites had hammocks too, only theirs were made with finer fibers, cotton, mostly and sometimes dyed with natural pigments or embroidered with symbols of their family lineage. If you were really fancy, your hammock might be strung between carved stone posts indoors, beneath murals of your ancestors judging your sleeping posture. We don't often think of beds as status symbols anymore unless you're the type to brag about your sleep number, but for the Mayans, a finely woven hammock said something. It said you were connected, that your rest mattered, that the gods might stop by to whisper in your dreams. And sure, their palaces had stone floors and cool shade, but no self-respecting ruler was lying down flat like a sack of maize. Elevation mattered. Swing mattered. You were floating in a symbol of sacred rest. Historians still argue whether royal hammocks were designed solely for sleep, or if they doubled as ceremonial seats, places to meditate, make decisions, or receive visions. But the lines between sleeping and dreaming, ruling and listening to the gods, were often blurred. You shift again, thinking about that. How even now, in your little nighttime journey, you're swaying through history gently, slowly, like time traveler on a leaf. Of course, not all hammocks were created equal. The elites had access to softer, more flexible materials. Commoners made do with tougher fibers, like agave or sisal, still strong, still clever, but maybe a bit more exfoliating on the thighs. You run your fingers along the edge of your own hammock. It's rough but well woven, the kind of thing that might last through years of nightly use. There are little knots, small imperfections. You get the sense that it was made by hand, not a factory, but fingers, maybe old fingers, maybe calloused ones. Someone wove this with intent. In noble homes, there were often multiple hammocks in one space. Rooms weren't divided like in modern houses. Privacy wasn't architectural, it was behavioral. A king might nap near his advisors or his family members, everyone swinging in rhythm, together yet apart. A shared trust, a suspended tribe. And then there were the colors. Mayans loved color. Indigo from fermented leaves, deep red from cochineal insects, yellow from tree bark. The richer your threads, the more respected you were. If your hammock had elaborate embroidery or jade beads woven in, you were somebody, but there was a spiritual side, too. Hammocks weren't just for luxury, they were offerings. Some were buried with their owners. Some were left for gods. Some were burned in ritual, so their smoke could carry prayers into the heavens. You lie back and try to picture a palace hammock bigger, softer, maybe with decorative tassels, maybe suspended beneath a thatched roof painted with stars. You imagine a ruler barefoot, sun darkened, eyes closed, floating in silence, not as an escape, but as an act of governance. After all, in Mayan culture, dreams were not just internal stories, they were cosmic messages. Your bed was a launch pad. And while European nobles were sleeping on towering canopied mattresses stuffed with straw, lice, and disappointment, Mayan nobles were swaying in breathable, washable, non-itchy cocoons. You try not to feel smug about that. Outside, the bugs change key. There's a pause in the croaks and chirps, a silence that feels like the jungle has taken a breath. Then a hoot, a long, low owl call. Somewhere nearby, something answers it. You are once again reminded that this is not your terrain, but you're still here, still above it, And hey, if it was good enough for Mayan kings, it's good enough for you. Even the way hammocks were strung spoke to their values. Not too high to fall far, not too low to invite snakes. The ropes were tied to thick beams wood, chosen carefully, sometimes even blessed. A poorly hung hammock could lead to a bad night. A well-hung one? That was a lullaby engineered. There's an old belief, half myth, half metaphor, that a noble who died in his sleep would swing upward into the stars, like a soul caught mid-sway, choosing heaven over earth. The hammock was a ladder, just horizontal. You let that thought drift across your mind like smoke. You're not a ruler. You don't have a temple. But tonight, suspended in this rope and shadow, you can almost feel what it meant to rest without weight, to trust the net, to believe the space between trees was enough to hold your whole existence. And then, with a final sigh, the hammock steadies. Your body molds to it completely, and the memory of kings rocks you softly toward your next dream. By now, your skin has learned the pattern of the ropes. You shift slightly and feel their imprint across your back and arms like vines, like stories. They don't hurt. They just remind you that you're held. Not crushed, not flattened, just suspended. And as your fingers absently trail one of the cords, you begin to wonder, where did this come from? Not the idea of the hammock that's old news by now, but the material itself, the stuff that holds you up. It's not cotton. It's not nylon. It's itchy dot. Turns out, if you had to guess, you're probably sleeping in something woven from henequen, the so-called green gold of the Yucatan. It's a type of agave, yes, the same family that gave the world tequila. Bless it, but this one doesn't make you drunk. It just holds your weight through the night. The Mayans didn't just stumble across this plant and think, hey, that's stringy. They learned how to process it over generations, scraping the pulp, drying the fibers, then twisting them into threads strong enough to hoist a human being. By hand, agave fiber is stiff at first. It softens with time and use, like the hammock, slowly learning your shape. It breathes. It resists mold. It keeps its strength. Honestly, it's more loyal than some people you've dated, and they used every part. The pulp left over after fiber extraction, fertilizer. The thorny tips, used as needles or ritual bloodletters, though hopefully not at the same time as hammock construction. The flower stalks, firewood. And the leaves those were sacred. Historians still argue whether agave processing began as a purely domestic task or had spiritual oversight. Some sources suggest that weavers sang while working, believing that the right melody could make the fibers stronger. Others point out that women often oversaw the hammock weaving process entirely, which gave them an economic and cultural power rarely discussed in Western depictions of Mesoamerican societies. You tug gently on a side rope. It doesn't budge. This thing could survive a monsoon or a moody toddler. And yes, there were moody toddlers and elders and sick folks and travelers, all of whom depended on hammocks to support them. These weren't just sleep tools, they were life platforms. People were born in hammocks, died in them, loved in them, laughed in them, told stories from them, and in some ways, those ropes held more than people. They held faith. Mayan mythology is filled with threads and knots. The gods themselves are sometimes said to weave the fates of humans. Some depictions show celestial serpents coiled like cords. And the hammock? It floats between those ideas. Not quite sacred, not quite mundane, just necessary. You're struck suddenly by the contrast to your modern life. Your bed is probably full of coils and foam and technology designed to simulate support. This hammock? It's just fiber, earth-grown, hand-shaped, nothing between. You and the intention of the maker, but time. And the maker, let's talk about them for a moment. Somewhere in a village not unlike the one outside your imagination, someone sat under a tree and spun this rope, maybe with a child beside them, maybe with a bowl of tanneries steaming nearby, maybe while humming a song about a storm god or a harvest moon. They didn't just make a product. They made a gift, Dot. It's easy to forget that before factories, every object had a face behind it. Every knot was deliberate. Every twist of fiber had breath behind it. The people who made these hammocks didn't just care that they worked. They cared that they lasted. And they did. There's evidence that Mayan-style hammocks have survived for centuries, not the fibers themselves, but the patterns, the knots, the way they loop and cradle and never quite let go. You turn slightly and think you hear a faint thwip outside, a rope tightening. Or maybe it's the wind. Or maybe the jungle is just tuning its strings. You're swaying again, not because you moved, but because the whole world did. Dot. And in the half-sleep that follows, your thoughts spiral back to the idea that the hammock isn't just an invention. It's an attitude, a declaration that you don't need walls and wires and noise to rest. You just need trust. Trust in the fibers. Trust in the hands that wove them. Trust in the idea that you won't fall. There's an old Mayan proverb, half lost, half reconstructed, that roughly translates to, the tightest knot holds nothing if the heart is loose. You're not entirely sure what it means, but it sounds right. And tonight you'll let the hammock hold that too. Because right now, the only thing between you and the earth is a bundle of threads spun from patience and plant. And somehow that's enough. You wake to something brushing your cheek. You flinch, but it's just the edge of the hammock's wide flap, gently blown upward by a passing breeze. Or maybe the jungle exhaled. Hard to say. Still, you're grateful it wasn't anything with legs. You adjust, pulling the hammock's edge over your shoulder like a blanket. It rustles softly, like paper or old leaves. And for a second you forget where you are. Then you hear the mosquito dot. It buzzes once. Close, very close. Then vanishes. You are reminded immediately and violently why the Mayans didn't treat hammocks as optional. Dot. Sleeping off the ground in the tropics wasn't just for fun. It was for survival. Everything down there wants a piece of you. Bugs, frogs, spiders the size of your palm. And that's not even counting the venomous things. The hammock was elevation, but the real game changer? The net. Mayan hammocks were often paired with intricate mosquito nets, woven separately, and sometimes dyed with herbal insect repellents. These weren't the flappy, thin curtains you buy in a camping aisle. These were thick, tough, and hung like temple veils, and in some cases the netting was tied into the hammock itself, turning the whole structure into a sealed cocoon. Air flowed freely. Bugs did not. Genius historians still argue whether these nets were spiritual in origin or simply practical. After all, many Mayan myths describe the night as a living thing filled with spirits, curses, and creatures who can only reach you if you're fully exposed. The net, in this light, becomes both a barrier and a filter, letting in air, but keeping out nightmares, and don't scoff at that. If you've ever woken up to a cockroach on your pillow, you too have questioned your belief in an orderly universe. You sigh and pull the edge tighter, but there's more to the net than bug defense. There was symbolism woven into it. Some Mayans believed the strands connected them to the stars, a sort of soft-spun galaxy. Just as the constellations formed patterns in the sky, your net traced invisible patterns around you, protection from both earthly and cosmic harm. It's strangely beautiful, isn't it? The idea that something as mundane as a net could be a ritual object, a tool not just of hygiene, but a belief that you shift in your hammock again, settling deeper. The fibers groan like old floorboards, but they hold. You're grateful for that. There's even a fringe belief, rare but persistent, that hammocks themselves were modeled after the Milky Way, that they were Earth's attempt to recreate the great cosmic sling that carried the gods. Some ancient stories describe celestial beings rocking gently in the sky, their movement mirrored by the swaying of a human sleeper on Earth. That makes you smile. The idea that you're not just resting, you're sinking, that your little sway is a ripple from a larger wave, a bedtime echo of something divine. You glance toward the open doorway. Outside, the fireflies are still performing. One blinks near. The entrance. Another pulses by your feet. They don't enter. Somehow the hammock and the net form a silent, do not disturb, sign that even insects respect. Mostly then buzz. Again. Closer this time, you swing a hand blindly. Miss another. Buzz this time. You hold your breath and wait nothing. Just silence. That's when you remember another Mayan trick, layering scents. The fibers of the hammock, especially the netting, were sometimes rubbed with crushed herbs like basil, mint, or epazote fragrant plants that not only masked human scent but actively repelled flying pests. And if you were extra cautious or extra bitten, you'd burn a bit of copal resin beneath the hammock. The smoke would drift upward in slow spirals, cloaking you in a scented barrier that smelled faintly of citrus and old temples. You catch a trace of that scent now, carried in from the doorway, earthy, sharp, clean. Even in sleep, the Mayans thought about balance. The smoke didn't just drive away mosquitoes, it carried prayers. Night was sacred. Sleep was not separation, it was participation. You were entering the dream world, and the dream world had rules. One rule, don't bring bugs with you. Another, stay elevated. You think again about the rope, about the netting above you, about how these delicate materials were the difference between a peaceful night and an itchy, possibly cursed ordeal. And again you feel that quiet awe, that blend of necessity and ceremony. The Mayans didn't separate the practical from the spiritual. They didn't hang up a net and call it done. They invited the night, prepared for it, protected themselves not just from illness or bites, but from wandering energies, stray thoughts, forgotten gods. You've never really prepared for sleep. Like that. Not with that kind of intention. Tonight, though. Maybe your as the fireflies blink in a steady rhythm. and the jungle begins to murmur a little more softly. You let your thoughts drift. You imagine a child, maybe your age, once curled, in a hammock beside you, net draped, eyes wide, listening to the night stories told by a grandmother or an older sibling. Tales of gods with crocodile teeth and jaguars who walked between worlds, of people who turned into stars, of hammocks that carried souls across rivers, of darkness. You pull the edge of the net slightly above your head and close your eyes. This isn't just sleep anymore. This is ceremony. You must have fallen asleep again. It's hard to tell. There's no clock, no buzzing phone, just darkness, hammock, and the deep background hum of jungle life on low volume. But the air is cooler now, less sticky, and your muscles feel heavier, in that pleasant way that suggests you've been completely still for a while. Then you hear it, a rustle, close, low, followed by a soft plop. You freeze. Some kind of insect? Small mammal? Spirit of a mildly irritated monkey? Nope. You remember. This is why hammocks existed in the first place. Because down there on the ground, that's where the problem is. You glance downward instinctively, even though your hammock has no view. You imagine the forest floor, mud, ants, beetles the size of toddlers, maybe a snake just passing through on its way to do some serpent business. And then you get it. The hammock wasn't about luxury. It was about saying, not today, Satan, or more accurately, not tonight, centipede. Sleeping on the ground in the lowlands was like sleeping inside a buffet, with you as the main course. Rain didn't just fall in the jungle. It stuck around, it pooled. It soaked. It filled the air and then sank into your bones. If your bedding touched the ground, you woke up damp at best, and a mold colony at worst. Historians still argue whether hammocks originated solely as insect avoidance tools, or if they began as storm season responses to flooding. Either way, it became clear to the Mayans pretty quickly. Dry and swinging, beat wet and twitchy every time. And it wasn't just the critters. Sleeping on the ground carried symbolic risks too. The earth in Mayan belief wasn't just a neutral surface. It had moods and grudges. The underworld, Xibalba, was beneath your feet literally. Lying down directly on it, unguarded, could invite attention from things you didn't want to meet during your REM cycle. That's why people were buried in the ground. But the living stayed above it, and that meant hammocks. Even the orientation of your hammock mattered. Some were strung from east to west to catch the morning breeze, others from north to south, aligning with certain stars or winds, and all of them elevated you from not just discomfort, but danger. You swing a foot gently and let the hammock move. The motion is reassuring, smooth, predictable. You are not down there. Some anthropologists argue that the Mayan avoidance of ground sleeping shaped their architecture. Houses were built with open interiors to allow hammock suspension. Sometimes multiple hammocks would be arranged in a radial pattern, like flower petals, around a central hearth. Imagine a family of 6, all gently swaying in unison, like a slow-motion carousel of dreams and no one on the ground, ever. You wonder briefly how many things you've taken for granted, like your bed, your room, your off switch from the world. These people had to invent sleep safety from scratch, with ropes and leaves and the persistent threat of jungle mischief. Your mind drifts to other things that live down there, beyond the snakes and bugs. Mayan folklore is full of creatures who crawl up from the dirt, dwarfs who speak riddles, shadow, dogs with human eyes, spirits that follow you home and sit on your chest as you sleep. You think about how these myths were born not from imagination alone, but from the real, animal-filled, unexplained chaos of life at ground level. And you're floating above it all. Not quite sky, not quite soil. Somewhere in between, where Mayans believed dreams were safest. There's a kind of defiance in that. A quiet declaration. I will rest, even if the world beneath me writhes. You pull the hammock tighter around your sides. Wrap yourself like a leaf or a burrito of defiance. And again you hear the rustle. A soft one, something brushing through leaves, slow, curious. A tail? A paw? A foot? Doesn't matter, you're not on the ground. And just like that, the hammock feels less like fabric and more like armor. A rope shield. A cocoon with purpose. Maybe that's why some rituals even required people to sleep in hammocks before major ceremonies, fasting, dreaming, waiting for a sign. You couldn't receive a message from the gods with one ear in the mud, and there's evidence that sick people were often placed in hammocks strung near smoke or herbs elevated both physically and spiritually for healing, not just comfort. Transformation. It's strange to think about how much thought went into where to sleep, how to sleep. These weren't throwaway choices. They were culture, belief, and survival braided into one literally. And tonight, as you float above an ecosystem that doesn't care what time it is, you feel that connection, that old wisdom, that simple, powerful understanding. You don't lie down to surrender, you rise up to rest. You shift. Not from discomfort, but from a dream, one of those slippery ones that melts as soon as you try to look at it. Something about water and stars and being rocked by hands too large to belong to any person. It lingers in your chest, like mist. You blink and pull the hammock around your shoulders like a shawl. That's when it hits you. Even birth happened here. In the Mayan world. Life didn't begin in a bassinet or on a table. It often began right here, in a swinging sling of fiber and hope. Hammocks weren't just beds. They were delivery rooms. Imagine this. A midwife known as an Ix-Aids leans close, her breath sweetened with herbs, her hands strong and steady. A pregnant woman reclines in a low-strung hammock, knees drawn, bracing with the rhythm of pain and rope. And her baby slides into the world with nothing beneath but fiber, cloth, and the warm embrace of tradition. Historians still argue whether this method was used across all regions or only in certain provinces, but archaeological records, along with oral history, suggest it was common enough to be remembered for centuries. And not just remembered, revered. Mayans understood that birth wasn't just physical. It was sacred, dangerous, holy. You weren't just delivering a baby. You were navigating the thin line between worlds. And the hammock. It served both realms. In many households, a special hammock was reserved for childbirth, washed in sacred water, sometimes dyed with indigo and blessed with smoke. It may have even been woven specifically for the occasion by the hands of female relatives in quiet anticipation. You can almost hear their low songs now, just under the buzz of insects and whispering leaves. The child would be caught in blankets, then cradled directly in the same hammock. No cold transition, no new room, no plastic-wrapped bassinet. The first breath of life taken in the same sling where their first kicks had jostled from within, and they'd grow up with it. As a baby, they'd nap in it. As a toddler, they'd learn to swing. As a teen, they'd hang their own. As an elder, they'd rock themselves to sleep under the same stars that had watched over their birth. There's something deeply human about that cycle. You shift slightly. Your hip presses against the ropes. They give, then hold. You think of all the infants who were soothed to sleep by this same swaying motion, who found rhythm before language. Some Mayan communities even believed the hammock helped shape the spirit of the child, that being suspended between earth and sky in those first hours of life encouraged balance, calmness, and dreams untroubled by dark roots. And it didn't end there. There's evidence that some rites of passage included sleeping alone in a ceremonial, hammock high above the ground, away from the firelight for a night. A test of courage. A conversation with the dark. You imagine that now. A child, maybe 10 years old, eyes wide, arms crossed, lying stiff as a flute in a lone hammock, while the jungle shifts and sings outside. Not sleeping, just being and then slowly letting go. Drifting, becoming part of the rhythm. You smile. It sounds terrifying, but also kind of beautiful. The hammock was more than just cloth and knots. It was memory, legacy. Each generation added its threads, not literally, but symbolically. Parents taught children how to tie the ends properly, how to find the sweet spot in the sag, how to keep balance when entering, exiting. Turning and yes, falling out was part of the curriculum, especially if you tried to show off. You picture a gangly boy trying to flip into his hammock, only to crash onto the clay floor in front of his friends. Laughter, teasing, maybe a bruise, but also learning, because falling out was expected. Learning to return, that was the skill. You glance down again. Not from fear this time, but out of habit. The ground is still far enough to feel safe. You swing a little and think about how the Mayans used to hang baby hammocks directly from ceiling beams, keeping them within reach and away from danger. Some were even designed with gentle rocking mechanisms, a pull cord or a counterweight, centuries ahead of modern parenting trends. You've read about Mayan lullabies, 2 songs layered with mythology, advice, even gentle warnings. A favorite. One references the moon goddess watching children as they sleep, blessing them with calm dreams if they behave. And if not, well, maybe a midnight snake would have a word that'll get any kid to lie still. You nestle deeper into your own cradle of rope and breath. There's something oddly moving about all of it. The intimacy, the handmade safety, the idea that the same net that once caught a newborn is now carrying you through the quiet edges of night. You're not just resting, you're rocking on. Centuries of tradition. And in that motion back and forth, in and out of memory, you begin to understand why this design never needed improving, why it worked then, why it still works now. Why it always will. Your dreams this time are slow and floaty, no distinct storylines, just shapes and colors. A golden thread unspooling across a velvet sky, leaves fluttering upward instead of down. A face you almost recognize, made of stars and shadows. When you stir awake, there's no startle, just breath, just hammock, and something else. A sense subtle but strong, that sleep. meant something to the Maya. It wasn't just a bodily need. It wasn't recovery or rest for rest's sake. It was a passage. You roll your head gently against the fabric, and the fibers groan in sympathy. As the hammock sways again, you remember the stories. Sleep wasn't considered passive in Mayan thought. It was ceremonial, intentional, a time of contact, not retreat. In their worldview, sleep was an in-between. Not quite life, not quite death. A sacred threshold. And that threshold, it had rules. Before sleeping, many Mayans performed small rituals, rubbing herbs on their skin, whispering quiet thanks, offering a pinch of maize to the hearth. Not elaborate ceremonies, but gestures, invitations to the divine. Historians still argue whether these nightly gestures were part of codified religion or individual superstition. But one thing is clear, they mattered, because dreams weren't seen as internal nonsense. They were messages. Sleep was the phone line, and the hammock, that was your altar. You shift, letting one hand dangle over the side. It brushes air and nothing else. You feel suspended, not just from the ground, but from your own assumptions. Because what if sleep isn't something you fall into? What if it's something you enter? To the Maya, each night was a crossing, a ceremony of silence. And dreams weren't random, they were maps, clues, prophecies. Some were believed to predict the harvest. Others warned of illness. Some simply confirmed the presence of the gods. And it wasn't just priests or shamans who believed that. Farmers, mothers, children, all were considered valid receivers. If you dreamt of a black dog or water that flowed upward, or a serpent swallowing its tail, you might be called to speak with the AJKG, the timekeeper, who could interpret your vision. You try to imagine that in your own life, waking up, sitting with your family, saying, "I dreamed of maize turning blue," and everyone stopping to listen. No eye rolls. No, you had too much chili. Just attention. Respect. Even reverence. The hammock creaks. You rock with it. The very act of swinging was tied to spirituality. Some Mayan glyphs depict the soul as a bird fluttering upward during sleep. Others show figures mid-sway, with threads of smoke or light pouring from their mouths as if speech and dreaming shared the same breath. There's even a story of a high priest who claimed to receive prophecy only while swaying. He suspended himself from the ceiling, wrapped in cloth, and refused to sleep any other way. When asked why, he said, "The world moves, so must I." Tonight, you believe him, and the more you think about it, the more your modern rituals feel. Thin. Phone, blanket, darkness, maybe a podcast. But here, in this world, sleep is an entrance, and dreams are not private. The Maya believed that dreams could be shared, that two people sleeping near each other might walk the same dream path, encountering mirrored symbols. In families, children's dreams were monitored closely. A good dream might be nurtured. A bad one countered with ritual. It wasn't about comfort. It was about direction. That's why sleep spaces were carefully arranged. Hammocks facing certain directions. No fire burning too close. No sharp objects beneath. Everything in balance. And balance was everything. To go to bed with a grudge could spoil your dreams. To ignore your visions, to forget them, that was dangerous. Forgetfulness was spiritual erosion. That's why dreams were often recited upon waking, while still swinging, so the motion would help keep them intact. You rock again, slower now, trying to feel the trace of your own dream. A fragment, a color, anything. But the hammock isn't just about remembering Dot, it's about opening Dot to whatever comes. Outside, the insects have quieted a little, or maybe your ears have just adapted. Either way, the silence feels intentional, like the jungle is listening now, not speaking. You imagine an old Mayan woman, her skin like parchment, her eyes like flint rocking, slowly and smiling, not because she's tired, but because she's ready to cross. And tomorrow, if the gods are kind, she'd bring back a message. You draw the hammock a little tighter around your body, like a robe, and in the darkness, rocked between time and breath, you begin your own slow crossing, not to escape, but to listen. You are dreaming again, but it's hard to tell when the dream begins because now the air feels denser and your body doesn't quite end where your skin does. You're not in your hammock anymore, or maybe you still are. You're floating. Yes, but the ropes are gone. Above you, a blanket of stars, strung in silver curves like the edge of a god's robe. Below you, mist, thick and blue-gray, hiding what may be jungle or cloud or nothing. You are swinging between them, not moving. Your limbs just held Dot, and then you see them, the gods, not in thrones, not in temples, Dot in hammocks, strung between the limbs of sacred ceiba trees, or hung from beams of moonlight. One rocks gently, her long obsidian hair trailing like water. Another reclines, and a cradle of flame, hands clasped behind his head, eyes glowing but amused. You blink. It makes no sense, and yet it feels right. Dot. The Maya believed that the gods themselves rested in hammocks. In fact, one of their most ancient sky deities, Itzamna, the creator god, was sometimes depicted reclining in a celestial hammock, arms outstretched, dreaming the world into shape, not ruling, not judging, dreaming. Historians still argue whether these depictions were meant to humanize the gods or to elevate the hammock itself into sacred territory. Either way, the result is the same. The heavens swing to Dot, and when the gods swing, they do not fall. You sway gently in your sleep, as if trying to match their rhythm. You don't feel weightless. You feel dot, woven into something. The Mayans sometimes describe the universe as a great net threaded with stars, anchored by the 4 cardinal directions and gently swaying in cosmic wind. That image wasn't metaphorical. To them, it was how reality worked. Even time moved in loops and spirals like the knots in a hammock. Everything connected, nothing flat. Dot, and so sleep became an echo of that design. Your body swinging not just in space but in pattern. You began to recall one of the more obscure myths of twin brothers, heroes who journeyed to the underworld to face the lords of death. Their secret weapon? Not a sword, a game, and rest. They tricked their enemies. They pretended to sleep. They swung above the underworld fire pits and hammocks, always just out of reach. Eventually, they ascended, reborn as the sun and moon. The message wasn't lost. Sleep was power. Dreaming was survival. Dot and hammocks, they were bridges. You start to wonder, what if every night in a hammock wasn't just rest, but rehearsal? A practice run for death, not in a morbid way, but in the sense of trust, the letting go, the float between what was and what's next. You breathe in slowly. The air tastes like flowers you don't recognize. Your fingers twitch slightly. The hammock sways out in your dream. The gods begin to whisper. You don't hear words. You feel weight shifting in your chest, a sensation of being remembered, of being seen. A golden thread spins from one of their fingers, stretching down like a fishing line, and ties itself gently to your heart. Not a tug, not a claim, just a tether that you know. Somehow that when you wake you'll forget most of this. But the thread will remain. Mayans believed that some dreams weren't meant to be remembered in detail, but lived through. Like walking through a cloud of meaning, or sitting in the lap of a truth too large to name. That's why so few written dream records exist, because the real message was stored somewhere deeper, in bones, in habits, in the way you tie your hammock the next night, in the way you pause before sleeping. They also believed the gods slept, just like humans, that even divine beings needed to dream, but not about us, with us dot, and maybe that's what you feel now. Not separate dot, but joined. You breathe in, the gods fade, the stars drift apart, and you're swaying again, not in the sky, not in myth, but back in your own bundle of rope and patience. The night hums. You are still held, and somewhere above or maybe inside you feel the faint pull of that golden thread, gently swinging in time with your breath. You wake not with a jolt, but with that soft awareness that you've changed position, your arms asleep, your foot's tangled. There's a line pressed into your cheek from the hammock edge. Reality has returned, gently but firmly. You stretch one leg and feel the whole hammock shift in response, like a boat adjusting to its passenger. And then you nearly fall out. There it is, the ancient rite of gravitational betrayal, the subtle lean too far, the sudden shift in balance, the unmistakable lurch of realizing you're 1/2 inch from becoming a tangled floor burrito. Somehow, you save it. Grip the edge, plant your foot, correct the sway, you breathe out, triumphant. The gods approve. But it's a reminder, hammocks are not foolproof. Mayans knew that, and over generations they developed tricks, habits, and techniques to keep themselves from dropping like startled toucans. First rule, angle. You don't lie in a hammock like it's a coffin. That's rookie stuff. You lie diagonally so your body flattens out. It reduces the curve, eases back strain, and keeps you stable. Think of it like reclining on a human-sized bowstring. Only without the snap. Modern hammock users still debate this. Some insist straight is fine. Others say diagonal is life or death. The Mayans, they figured it out centuries ago. Diagonal is smoother, safer. Sleep IER. Second rule. Tightness. Too tight, and the hammock doesn't sway. It just cramps you into a stiff banana. Too loose and you're one roll away from becoming a bedtime statistic. Mayans adjusted tension daily. It was an art, like tuning an instrument. They even had a system for tying knots that could be adjusted without unlooping the whole thing. Smart, right? Historians still argue whether hammock hanging methods varied regionally or if there was a universal perfect sag ratio. The prevailing theory is it depended on the user. Elders might like more sway, warriors less, children They usually fell asleep mid-swing anyway. You shift again, testing your own setup. You're doing fine, maybe a little crooked, but you haven't hit the ground yet, so that's a win. Then there's the matter of entry and exit. You don't just plop into a Mayan hammock. You don't dive. You don't leap. You approach with respect. Step 1, grab the edges. Step 2, sit in the middle, like you're testing a frozen lake. Step 3, slowly swivel and raise your feet in a controlled arc, resisting the urge to flail or make eye contact with anyone watching. Some Mayan hammocks even had stabilizing loops woven into the ends grip points for elders or injured people. The modern equivalent of handrails, but made of twisted fiber. And once you're in, staying in is a different matter. Remember, these homes didn't have walls full of soft pillows. If you slipped, you were landing on packed clay or, worse, someone else's sleeping area. You had to earn your place. That's why some families placed clay pots or wooden stoppers beneath the hammock. If you swung too hard, it hit the stopper and bounced back, like bumpers in bowling. But for humans, others used a dual hammock system, a sleeping hammock suspended inside a secondary catch net. Fall out of one, you land in the other. It's basically hammock insurance. Then there's the position. Training. Kids were taught from a young age how to sleep still. No kicking, no wild rolling, no spinning into a cocoon of confusion. You had to earn that motion control. And if you didn't, you learned quick. You picture a little Mayan child 6 years old, maybe curled up, swaying gently, utterly still. Beside him, his grandmother, eyes closed, arms folded, swaying in perfect rhythm. That's how it was passed down. Through example. And maybe a few tumbles. You chuckle softly in the dark. Even now, the idea of falling out of bed carries a kind of childish shame. But for the Maya, it wasn't shameful. It was part of learning, part of knowing your body, knowing the limits of swing. You shift your arm carefully, and the hammock sways again, gently, predictably, like it knows you now. It's a kind of trust exercise, really, between you and the rope, between your weight and the knots someone tied years ago. You don't think about that in a regular bed. Beds are passive. They hold you, but a hammock? It responds. It expects you to listen. You remember now something you read, that some Mayan warriors slept in hammocks even during campaigns, strung between trees in hostile forests, light enough to carry, quick enough to set up, and just high enough to avoid ambush by crawling things. They'd sleep with one foot over the edge, ready to touch down, ready to not fall. It wasn't comfort. It was vigilance. The hammock taught it, reinforced it, and now, centuries later, here, you are swinging in that same tradition. You don't fall. You learn not to. You adjust, you balance, you float. And slowly, that sway becomes smaller and smaller until it becomes stillness, morning, or at least something like it. The light hasn't broken through the thatched roof just yet, but the sky is different now, less velvet, more ash. The bugs are quieter, replaced by the far-off sounds of birds warming up their vocal cords like jungle sopranos. Somewhere nearby, a rooster lets out a cry that sounds less triumphant and more like a personal complaint. And you're still swinging, softer now, barely a breath of motion. The hammock has become a still pond, and you are its last ripple. Then comes the hardest part of any hammock sleeper's journey, getting out. You steel yourself. One arm flings over the side, finds a rope. The other reaches for the floor dirt, warm, firm. You half roll, half slide, land with one foot down and the other stubbornly tangled. There it is. The Mayan wake-up call. Gravity. You're up. And already you're missing it. The hammock sways slightly behind you, still warm from your sleep. It looks proud, smug, even, like it knows you'll be back. And it's right, but for now it's time to move, because in the Mayan world, sleep was sacred, but so was motion. The same fibers that held your dreams last night are about to be folded, rolled, and slung across your back like any other tool. This bed goes with you. That's one of the forgotten wonders of the hammock, portability. The Maya didn't treat sleeping as something that had to happen in one place. Hammocks could be hung, unhooked, carried, light, flexible, durable. Wherever you stopped, if there were 2 trees, 2 beams, 2 poles, you had a bed. Historians still argue whether Mayan nomadism was widespread or concentrated in certain classes, messengers, traders, even warriors, but the hammock moved with all of them. It was essential. You could wrap it in a sling and carry it on your shoulder. Some were even woven with built-in ties or straps to make transport easier. The knots at either end weren't just for hanging. There were handles, lifelines, anchors, and each time you unrolled it, you did so with care. You checked for tears. You retied the ends. You gave it a good shake, just in case anything with too many legs had moved in. You didn't rush it, because setting up your hammock wasn't just sleep prep, it was ritual. Even today, in rural Yucatan villages, there's a kind of quiet choreography to the morning hammock reset. The ropes are loosened, the hammock is coiled like a sleeping snake, and it's hung on the wall or bundled in a corner. The space transforms. Sleeping area becomes working area, living room, kitchen, temple. It's efficient, but also philosophical. A Mayan home was not about fixed zones. It breathed, shifted, flexed. You don't own a bedroom. You carry your bed with you. And with that freedom comes resilience. Imagine needing to evacuate, to relocate, to travel by foot for days. You didn't leave comfort behind. You brought it, slung over your shoulder like a loyal dog, ready to hang between trees, columns, or even sticks jammed in the dirt. You start to walk, now still barefoot. The ground is damp, but not muddy. It holds your weight like it knows you. You pass other homes, some hammocks already rolled and stowed, others still swinging, ghost-like, in the morning light. One old man is sitting in his still, not sleeping, just thinking, letting the sway do the talking. You realize something else. Hammocks weren't always private. Many Mayans slept communally, side by side, swing by swing. In the same room, the same breath, the same dark dot. It wasn't weird. It was normal. Sleep wasn't isolating. It was shared. And in some cases, even those who had passed were honored with their own hammocks. There are a tale these half whispered of ceremonial hammocks strung in the temples. Empty ones, symbolic ones, woven in colors specific to a departed elder or a fallen warrior. They weren't sat in, just swayed slowly beside the altar, as if waiting for a dream that would never return. It wasn't grief. It was memory, swinging. On a breeze, you pause, hand resting against the bark of a tree, and glance up. Above you, two thick branches extend, perfect distance apart. Your instinct kicks in. You could string one up here, right now. In under 3 minutes, it would hold. That's what centuries of design gets you. It's strange how something so humble, so quiet, could carry so much history, so much movement. And yet, the hammock did just that. It wasn't just a personal bed. It was a cultural transmitter, a symbol of adaptability, of sacredness, of sleep that traveled. It was with Mayan merchants as they bartered obsidian and jade. With families moving toward new planting lands, with warriors in the forest and priests waiting for signs. And now, tonight, or rather this morning, it's with you. You look over your shoulder, and sure enough, the hammock is still there. Waiting. Foldable. Faithful. And suddenly you understand. This isn't the end of sleep. It's just intermission. Because wherever you go, the hammock will go too. And when night returns, so will the swing. You step carefully between fallen leaves, the ground warm beneath your feet, still holding the hush of early day. Somewhere in the trees, a toucan calls out, its voice like a rusty hinge and a flute having an argument. Farther off, a woman's laugh, sharp, relaxed, real. Someone's awake. Someone's cooking, but your mind isn't quite here. It's there still in the swaying net of the night, still thinking about how everything you experienced, everything you learned, came not from a classroom or scroll, but from lying down in the dark, being still and listening. And then you remember. It didn't last. Because one day, everything changed. Imagine this. A ship. Massive, strange, carved like nothing the Maya had ever seen. It doesn't sail up a river, it sails through time, through empire, through quiet. It brings metal, swords, boots, thunder in the form of guns. And men. Spaniards. They step ashore and immediately misunderstand everything. And at the top of their "what is going on here" list, the hammock. According to early accounts, the conquistadors were baffled. Why were these people sleeping in nets? Were they for fishing? For holding prisoners? Was this a trick? Some kind of jungle sorcery? They didn't get it. Beds were supposed to be solid, flat, preferably stuffed with hay and lice. A good Catholic bed was heavy, wooden, unmoving. How could a net be dignified? How could it be sacred? Historians still argue whether the Spanish rejected the hammock entirely at first, or adopted it selectively for use in camps and ships. What's clear is this. There was a clash not just of cultures, but of posture, and that clash echoed everywhere. Temples dismantled, hieroglyphs erased, people forced into new villages, new clothes, new sleep. But even in conquest, the hammock held on, because here's the wild twist. Those same Spaniards who mocked them, they ended up using them, especially at sea. Turns out on a rocking ship, a swinging bed made more sense than a sliding one. Sailors discovered that hammocks were cooler, drier, and less vomit-inducing than bunks. The Maya had engineered the perfect seabed long before Europeans ever imagined. Sleeping without touching the floor. So what started as mockery turned into mimicry. And by the 17th century, hammocks were standard issue for navies around the world. British, Spanish, Portuguese, all swinging like Mayan kings, though they'd never admit it. You glance up through the trees and imagine one of those early Maya watching the Spaniards fumble to hang their hammocks upside down, wondering how the advanced world could get something so simple so wrong. And yet, the real loss wasn't about the hammock, Dot. It was about everything else, Dot. With colonization came the erosion of so many Mayan practices, rituals, languages, dreams. The hammock survived, yes, but its context changed. Its holiness faded. It became a piece of furniture, a product. There's an irony in that the object survived, but the meaning was stripped away, like keeping a candle but forgetting what it's for. Even today, in tourist towns across Mexico and Central America, you can buy authentic Mayan hammocks in shops filled with bright lights, pop music, and plastic chairs. They're beautiful, yes, but they hang under ceilings, not stars. They swing for fun, not for passage. And still they swing. You hear the creak of one now, as you walk past a home with faded blue shutters. Inside, an old woman gently rocks, her body curled like a question mark. She's not sleeping, just swaying, maybe dreaming, maybe remembering, because that's the secret. Even if the world forgets the why, the body remembers the how. Dot. The hammock is still sacred if you let it be, and for many Maya today, it still is. In homes untouched by resort gloss, hammocks remain central, still used, still shared, still tied to beams passed down for generations. They're not a novelty, they're continuity, and maybe that's what matters most. Not that the world misunderstood them, but that they never stopped swinging anyway. You pause beneath a tree whose limbs stretch wide, one to the east, one to the west. Perfect hammock anchors. You almost reach for your bundle. The muscle memory is there, but instead you sit on the roots and close your eyes, and you think about those who lost their language, their temples, their names, and still chose to pass down the rhythm of rest, the wisdom of weightlessness. They, miracle of a night, survived in air. You open your eyes and whisper a quiet thank you, not to a god, but to a people who never needed stone walls to build something eternal. Because no matter how much the world tried to colonize their silence, the Maya never gave up their swing. The wind is rising now. Not strong, just steady. The kind of wind that brushes through trees like it's looking for stories. It carries the scent of wet leaves, burned corn husks, maybe even distant rain. The jungle never smells the same twice. And in that wind you hear something familiar, a soft, low creak. Wood against rope, a hammock. You follow it. It's not far, just beyond the edge of the village. A small open-air patio, shaded by palms and strung with 4 hammocks, each swaying lazily like they're gossiping with the breeze. There's no one in them, just wind, rope, and memory. It looks old, but not abandoned. You step closer and see that these hammocks aren't made from plain white cotton or mass-market nylon. They're colored not garish, but rich, deep ochres, faded indigo. Some have embroidery on the ends, soft tassels, beadwork. Every thread says, this meant something. Because the hammock never disappeared. It evolved. After the Spanish conquest, after the churches replaced temples and the codices were burned, the hammock moved on. Not into museums, but into modern homes. Modern lives. Became part of daily life again, just different. Now, You can find hammocks in cement-walled kitchens, hung between rusted nails, in city apartments with tiled floors, in tiny coastal villages where the walls are painted bright turquoise and the floors are always sand-dusted. They're not relics, they're furniture, but also still something more. Historians still argue whether today's hammock culture is a direct survival of pre-colonial tradition or a hybrid of influences. But most agree the DNA is there. You can trace the line, fiber by fiber, back through time. Even if the meaning shifted, the motion DIDN single quotes T dot, and now, oddly enough, the rest of the world has started to catch up. Hammocks are trendy. They're in catalogs, Instagram posts, spas. They're sold as wellness tools, stress reducers, even luxury items. Hand-woven by indigenous artisans. Says the tag, though, you're not sure the buyer understands what that actually means. They buy it for the aesthetic, the vibe. You wonder what the weavers would think of that. Because for the Maya, every loop was a skill, a song, a thread in the survival of their identity. The commercialization of it is complicated. Still, something in you hopes the swing speaks louder than the packaging. You sit in one of the 4 hammocks. It dips under you, familiar and patient. The ropes creak a little. You adjust, finding the angle. Diagonal, as you've learned. And then you float again. Just like always. There's something quietly rebellious about it. In a world that races, buzzes, scrolls, demands, the hammock whispers, wait, swing, trust. Even in modern Mayan communities, this lesson holds. Children still grow up learning how to enter without flipping. Elders still rock through the afternoon heat, swaying like pendulums of time. Guests are still offered the best spot close to the breeze, far from the smoke. And in the Yucatan, today, it's not uncommon for people to prefer hammocks over beds. Not because they can't afford the latter, but because they trust the former. A foam mattress might last a decade. A well-woven hammock, 3 generations. You close your eyes, you picture the hands that wove this one. Maybe a woman sitting on a shaded porch, her back straight, arms steady. Maybe a teenager learning the pattern, knot by knot, from a grandmother who still says the gods are watching, not because they must, but because they want to be remembered. And the hammock remembers. It cradles your spine in the shape of memory. It swings to the rhythm of centuries. It holds you with the confidence of something that knows it works. Outside, the breeze picks up again. You hear another hammock creak, maybe yours, maybe the one next to it. And in that sound, you hear the full circle, from jungle to palace, from ritual to routine. From forbidden belief to fashionable accessory, and back again, because in the end, no matter how far the world moves forward or sideways, the rope holds. And tonight, even in a hammock strung between concrete walls instead of sacred trees, that ancient promise still floats. You are safe. You are lifted. You are held. You don't want to leave it. The hammock. Not just this one, the literal bundle of fiber swaying beneath you now, but all of them. Every one you've imagined, remembered, or drifted through in dreams since this long, quiet night began. You've come so far. From the sticky hush of a jungle hut to the starlit swing of celestial gods. From the gav fibers spun by patient hands to the thrum of modern life trying to package and sell what was never meant to be unwrapped. And through it all, the hammock held. Just like it's holding you now, you lie back, gently rocking, and take stock. Your breath is slower, your thoughts fewer. There's a rhythm in your blood that wasn't there before. Something ancient, soft, insistent. And somewhere behind your eyes, a string of stories hums woven tight, like rope. You remember birth hammocks, healing hammocks, hammocks in temples, on porches, between worlds. You remember falling out, getting back in, learning balance. The Mayans never needed a word for ergonomics. They lived it. They didn't need Wi-Fi sleep trackers either. They tracked the stars. You chuckle softly at the thought. The sound echoes gently in the stillness, then fades into the net of night. You remember, too, the first time Europeans saw a hammock and thought it was for trapping animals. They couldn't see the elegance, the defiance, the sacred engineering of something that balanced body, spirit, and gravity all at once. But you can now, because you've been there, swung between ceiba trees, drifted through astral cradles, floated above the damp and the dangerous, fallen asleep beside dream priests and cloud weavers, and now you're just still. You inhale, long, slow, like the jungle did earlier, before the hush. The hammock doesn't move anymore. You've become its centered dot, and in that stillness, something soft unfolds. You won't see hammocks the same way again. Not at the beach. Not in a backyard. Not hanging for sale in a market, because now you know they are not decorations. They are declarations, a refusal to sink, a trust in air, a net spun from the wild belief that you can sleep between 2 points and wake up changed. So you lie there, cocooned in cotton, memory, and motionless swing, and let the story dissolve around you. Let the air grow thicker. Let the fireflies fade. Let the last breeze find your cheek and leave it cool. You have reached the far end of the rope. And the only thing left to do is rest. So now, as your thoughts grow slower than the sway, as your limbs melt deeper into stillness, and the soft breath of night settles around your ears like warm cloth, let yourself drift. No more story, no more questions, no more remembering where the rope was tied or how close the ground used to feel. Right now, there is only this, a hammock, barely moving, the whisper of leaves outside your reach, and the space between stars quiet, distant, waiting. You are above the world, but not alone, cradled by a shape that thousands before you trusted, lifted by fibers that once held babies, warriors, and whispered prayers, swayed by a rhythm that belongs to no one, and to everyone. There is no need to adjust, no need to rise, no need to think. Let your breathing deepen. Let it match the hush of wind slipping past wood. Let it match the breath of someone you've never met 1,000 years ago in the same swing. And if dreams come, let them. No pressure, no plan. Just the rope, just the cradle, just you floating. Held gently between earth and sky, safe in the knowing that this night, like every night before it, knows exactly how to carry you home. Good night. Sleep well. You're already there. Sweet dreams.